Okay, this PowerPoint's on the book of Jeremiah, the weeping prophet. Um, the first one is political situation. The political situation during Jeremiah's time was Hosea's kings, and or Hosea was the king, and his four sons were the other kings. They weren't for God except for Hosea. He tried to create a Deuteronomic reform with the laws of Deuteronomy. There was an uprising against all the authorities of the surrounding countries of Judah and Judah itself. The kings did not last very long, with Hosea lasting from 640 to 609 BC, and he was the longest reign. Jehoahaz lasted for 3 months in the year 609 BC and was eventually taken over by the Egyptian king. Jehoiakim was king of Judah from 609 to 598. Jehoiachin was also king for 3 months from the year 598 to 597. And last but not least, Zedekiah reigned from 597 to 586, the second longest one to reign in Judah. There were constant battles between Assyria, Babylon, Egypt, and Judah, eventually leading the Israelites into exile by the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar. And to the side, you have Judah's last five kings, a picture that tells you what happened to them, where they died at, and how many years they reigned. The economic and social situation was pretty stable in Judah because they could stand on their own without any foreign nations helping them. Um, when countries such as Babylon invaded, the very poorest were left behind to work the land and everyone else was taken captive. The kings were known as being very rich, wore expensive clothing made of fine linen, as you see in the picture of Hosea to the right. They wore diadems, which were like crowns that were decorated with pearls and gems. The people were accepted, rich or poor, as long as they participated in the idolatrous worshipping of Baal or the other gods they worshipped. Everyone was in unity with the false gods, so they did not need wealth to separate them, although I'm sure there were servants and slaves in those days. The religious situation during the time of the five kings was different than it was supposed to be. Hosea worked to try to establish a stable law and a stable Deuteronomic law and obey God, but his grandfather Manasseh had brought so much wickedness and idolatry into the eyes and ears of Judah that it was very hard to turn them away from their false gods. There were sacrifices to the statue of Baal and many other wicked things that were being done in the land. Babylon also believed in the same God, making this a good theory of why the nations were always at war. Judah's prophets Jeremiah and some kings Josiah wanted to establish a kingdom based around Yahweh, and other kingdoms wanted to worship the idols that they had created, including Judah after the death of Hosea. And to the right, you have the god Baal, which was the Canaanite god they worshipped. Important dates: Jeremiah's birth. History suggests around 650 BC. Jeremiah's ministry lasted from 626 to 587, which is approximately 41 years. The fall of Solomon's temple was in 586, the same time that Jerusalem fell to Babylon. Hosea's religious reform was in 622. The date of the writing is said to be between 630 and 580 BC, and Jeremiah's death is unknown, but it is known that he did die in Egypt. And over here are depictions of Solomon's temple. There is um, I cannot really think of the word for it, a sculpture of it, and there is a painting of it at the top. The areas of Jeremiah's origin and ministry. Jeremiah was born in Anathoth, 2.5 miles northeast of Jerusalem. And the top map shows Anathoth right above, or to the northeast of Jerusalem. And his ministry was in Israel, Judah, and in Egypt, or throughout his exile into Egypt. And down here is the three stages of Jeremiah's ministry: 627 to 605. He prophesied while Judah was threatened by Assyria and Egypt. 605 to 586, he proclaimed God's judgment while Judah was threatened and besieged by Babylon. And 586 to 580, he ministered in Judah and in Egypt after Judah's downfall. The class, occupation, education of Jeremiah. Um, he seemed to be middle to high class. He came from a line of priesthood and had many popular people in his family. His occupation, from what we know, was a prophet slash minister. If he had any other occupation before this time, it is not recorded. It is stated in the book of Jeremiah that he was called to be a prophet before he was even born in Jeremiah 1 4 through 5. He is said to have been very well educated because of the poetic way he wrote and the similes and words he used to compare things to things such as nature. He was able to write and speak very well, and his prophecy and teachings were that of an educated man. And to the right is a picture of the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah's call happened in the 13th year of the reign of Hosea, the last good king of Judah. His call was to preach the coming judgment of the nations who did not repent truly with their hearts from the evil and wickedness they were committing and obey the Lord's commandments. His call is found in Jeremiah 1 4 through 10. The type of prophet, he was considered a fringe prophet simply because he did not have many people following him and he had to go out on his own. This was especially true seeing as he was preaching judgment against the nations and people did not like negativity. The condition of the Hebrew text. The condition of the Hebrew book of Jeremiah was said to be in good condition. There are two versions, a Masoretic and a Septuagint version, one in Greek and one in Hebrew, the Greek version being much shorter than the Hebrew version. There is about 1/8 of the text that is missing from the Septuagint version of the book of Jeremiah. There have been manuscript fragments of both versions found at Qumran. The Masoretic text and the Greek translation are both based on different versions of the Hebrew text. And to the right at the bottom, you have the Jeremiah scroll, and at the top is just a version of the King James Jeremiah. Rare words used in text. There weren't many references to the new covenant are mentioned in Jeremiah for the first time in Jeremiah 31, verses 31 through 34. And that is, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not like the covenant that I made with their fathers on the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt. My covenant that they broke, though I was their husband, declares the Lord. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law within them, and I will write it on their hearts. And I'm running a little low on time, so I'm just going to leave it at that. And to the right is a picture of the new covenant. Okay. Indications of history, composition, and redaction. It is said that the chapters 1 through 24 in the book of Jeremiah are the most authenticated parts of the text. It is also thought that there was a book of Baruch incorporated within the text of Jeremiah when being published to better clarify the biography of Jeremiah. Baruch was his secretary who traveled with him and was by his side most of the time. It is said that Baruch revised and rewrote many of Jeremiah's sayings in his own Deuteronomistic style. There are also two different versions of Jeremiah, a Greek and a Hebrew version. Both are based on different versions of the Hebrew text. The kinds of material. There are biography, poetic oracles, and historical documentation. The biographical material is to be found in chapters 26 through 29, 32, and 34 through 44. The poetic material is found largely in chapters 1 through 25 and consists of oracles in which the prophet speaks as God's messenger. The outline of Jeremiah. The call of the prophet is chapter 1. Warnings and exhortations towards Judah is chapter 2 through 35. Earliest discourses, chapter 2 through 6. The temple message is chapter 7 through 10. Covenant and conspiracy, 11 through 13. Messages concerning the drought, 14 through 15. Disaster and comfort, 16 1 through 17. Command to keep the Sabbath holy, chapter 17 19 through 27. Lessons from the Potter, chapter 18 through 20. Condemnation of kings, prophets, and people, chapter 21 through 24. Foretelling the Babylonian exile, chapter 25 through 29. Promises of restoration, chapter 30 through 33. Historical appendix, chapter 34 through 35. Sufferings and persecutions of the prophet, chapter 36 through 38. Burning Jeremiah's scroll, which is where the king of Egypt burns the scroll, I'm thinking. Imprisoning Jeremiah, chapter 37 through 38. The fall of Jerusalem and its aftermath, 39 through 45. The fall itself, chapter 39. Accession and assassination of Gedaliah, chapter 41, chapter 40, verses 1 through 41, 15. Migration to Egypt, chapter 41, verses 16 through 43, 13. Prophecy against those in Egypt, chapter 44. Historical appendix and promise to Baruch, chapter 45. Judgment against the nations, chapter 46 through 51. Against Egypt is 46. Against Philistia is 47. Against Moab is 48. Against Ammon is 49 1 through 6. Against Edom is 49 7 through 22. Against Damascus, 49 23 through 37. Against Kedar and Hazor, or Arabia, chapter 49 28 through 33. Against Elam, 49 34 through 39. Against Babylon, chapter 50 through 51. And the historical appendix is chapter 52. The main message of the book of Jeremiah is to relay what the Old Testament has been telling us thus far, that in order to have happiness and prosper, and for Israel to have remained a nation at that time, they needed to obey God, and they did not. And that did not mean to just worship in the temple. It meant to follow his ways and obey his laws. The message was clear that Israel did not follow God and turned to Baal and other idols. Therefore, God sent them into exile, and Babylonia captured them. Some subsidiary themes. Jeremiah did not agree with the Davidic covenant because it was leading the Israelites to believe that all they had to do was be in the temple and God would protect them. Instead, he agreed more with the Abrahamic covenant, which stated the obedience of God was needed in order to be protected. Theology behind the book of Jeremiah. The theology behind the book of Jeremiah is that God is angry, pained, and benevolent. Oracles from Jeremiah to the nations of the world warn against the wrath that God will put upon them if they do not heed to his laws and his voice instead of worshiping idols and doing wicked things. The prophetic ministry is pathos and conflict. The book of Jeremiah depicts a God of persistence, integrity, and freedom. Jeremiah prophesies judgment and salvation, and Jeremiah portrays the dynamics of hope when he purchases land while Jerusalem is being besieged. The key texts in Jeremiah. The fall of Jerusalem, 39 1 through 18. The verse, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." It's a popular verse spoken today. It's Jeremiah 29:11. And the new covenant is spoken of for the first time. "The days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah." And I have a picture of the verse 29:11. Issues and questions. Issues that arise with the book of Jeremiah include things such as, was it really authored by one or two people? Was it only Jeremiah, or did Baruch, his helper, have some say in the writings? This issue arises because there was a Baruch Dead Sea Scroll found that was later added to Jeremiah. And that's going to be it for the presentation. I hope it's interesting.